Your Excellency, Mr. Salman Khurshid, Minister of External Affairs, Republic of India, Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Chairman, Institute of South Asian Studies, Ms. Vijay Thakur Singh, High Commissioner of India to Singapore, Professor Tan Tai Yong, Director, Institute of South Asian Studies, Mrs. Elaine Ang, CEO of National Library Board, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you all. On behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore, I warmly welcome you to this afternoon's public lecture with Minister Salman Khurshid. I now invite Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Chairman of the Institute of South Asian Studies, to deliver the opening remarks. Ambassador Pillai, please.
His Excellency, Mr. Salman Khurshid, Honorable Minister of External Affairs, Government of India, Her Excellency, Mrs. Vijay Thakur Singh, the Indian High Commissioner to Singapore, Elaine Ng, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome the Minister to Singapore and to ISAS, Institute of South Asian Studies. ISAS has been fortunate to have the privilege of hosting lectures and special addresses of several senior ministers from India and the other South Asian countries. We are very happy to have the latest edition, Mr. Khurshid. I am also happy to welcome the new Indian High Commissioner, Mrs. Vijay Thakur Singh. May I wish you, Madam, a very successful stay in Singapore. I also want to recognize the distinguished visitor I have from Nepal, Mr. Binod Chowdhury. Mr. Khurshid is visiting Singapore at a time when the Asia Pacific is gaining increasing prominence in India's foreign and strategic policies. In Singapore, we are happy to note that not only are India-Singapore relations strong and robust, Singapore is also able to play a role in facilitating India's closer integration with Asia Pacific through its advantages of being in an economic, business and cultural hub. The topic for today is India, Southeast Asia, today and tomorrow. In another 2 years' time, India and Singapore will be celebrating 50 years of their diplomatic relationship. That will indeed be a significant milestone. Both countries, while following different development approaches and policies, have come a long way, fulfilling their national objectives and goals. They are now important stakeholders in each other's economic progress. They have gained a lot by interacting with each other and are expected to do more in the future. India has also been embarking on its Look-East policy. It has embarked on its Look-East policy since 1990s. In this respect, the Minister's visit to Southeast Asia and Singapore is significant, given that LEP had just finished 2 decades. India's formal links with ASEAN has increased by leaps and bounds over the last 2 decades. As India rises in strategic eminence, the region expects India to play a proactive strategic role in the area that is commensurate with its economic size and strategic growth. We would look forward to hearing the Honourable Minister's views on this. It is also my pleasure for me to introduce to those who don't know ISAS and also to Minister. As an autonomous research institute within the National University of Singapore, established in 2005, ISAS specializes in studying economic, strategic and political subjects on South Asia. It also plays a major role in increasing the knowledge and awareness about South Asia and in Singapore and in the region. ISAS efforts to build bridges between South Asia and the rest of the world has led it to take up study of South Asian diaspora and organize South Asian diaspora conventions in Singapore. The next such convention will be in November this year. The success of any institution depends on the scholars that it has. And I'd like to commend my team of scholars, led very ably by Professor Tan Tai Yong, and a management team which is led by Johnson, so that they organize events efficiently and pleasantly. The final thanks I have is for National Library Board for giving us this space, and I hope you will have a very pleasant exchange of views with the Minister, and we look forward to the Minister's speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Pillai. It gives me great pleasure to invite His Excellency, Mr. Salman Khurshid, Minister of External Affairs, Republic of India, to deliver his public lecture. Minister, please.
Good afternoon to all of you, Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Chairperson of the National Library Board, High Commissioner, very familiar faces, friends from the past, and very distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I am absolutely honored and overwhelmed to find such large attendance gathering on such a beautiful afternoon when the sun, I'm sure, invites you very eagerly, but that you are here and your presence in such large numbers indicates to me not so much your interest in what I have to say, but the topic and the content of the subject today, the relationship of India with Southeast Asia, both of today and tomorrow. I'm surprised you didn't say yesterday, today, and tomorrow, because frankly, what we have today and what we are to build for tomorrow largely, in a sense, to do with what we've had in the past. And that's where I distinguish our relationship with ASEAN from other very important and significant relationships that you have, including with China. I think that the importance of the congruence that we find in Southeast Asia between countries like India and China, and now, if I might add, Europe and the United States of America to it. This is, of course, the recognition of the fact that that the focus of world economics and geopolitics has inevitably shifted to this region. And it's good for all of us that it has, because it's come as part of a process of evolution that we anticipated by introducing in the early 90s the idea of look east policy of the Indian nation. We have had, over a historical period, we've had engagement in a very, very significant way with Africa, which grew out of the Afro-Asian vision that the first generation of top leaders in India had, led by Jawaharlal Nehru. And then we had this relationship that drew us towards the USSR, the admiration that India had for the equity that was critical to the economic and market arrangements in the erstwhile USSR, which fascinated the first generation of Indian leaders who believed that independence from political masters had to be complemented and supplemented by independence from want, and therefore equality played a very, very significant and important role in our perceptions of the world. And equality in terms of ownership of public utilities, of public wealth, gave India a particular unique understanding of the distance that we have to go and the direction in which we have to go. It is over a period where we believe, having successfully created a model of considerable equity, that we came in need of resources to multiply incomes, to garner resources, and to provide with greater potential exploitation by the ordinary citizen of India. And that's when the great reform process, economic reform process, took place in India, hardly complete. Even after 25 years, we're still struggling on certain dimensions of that process. But the core areas that we are able to address of our economic reform process unlocked an enormous potential. And as that potential got unlocked, we had to refine and redefine our priorities. And that's where we saw South Asia as a very, very significant potential for partnership. We knocked on the doors of ASEAN. We were invited in as sectoral partners, dialogue partners, and then it took 10 years for us to reach the next level. 20 years now of this relationship. We celebrated the commemorative summit that we had in Delhi, and I think those of you who would have been fortunate to be present at that celebration done at Rashtrapati Bhavan, there could not have been a greater statement of how beautifully we can combine ourselves than the performance that was done, the magical performance that was done in Rashtrapati Bhavan, combining the best cultural presentations from this entire region with what India had to offer. How our music combined, how our dance steps combined, how our costumes combined, how our smiles combined, and how a true resounding of the collective perception of the world was presented in colors and in sounds of music. And I see that, frankly, I see that as both the past, the present, and the future of our relationship. But as we look at this, it's important for you to understand where India is. It is difficult to understand what India's relationship with Southeast Asia is unless you actually understand where India is. And if I look at the experience of Singapore, I'm both encouraged and in a sense envious. You were able to do in a short span of 20 years with limitations of space, limitations of resources. You were able to do what India is still trying to do, because it happens to be doing it on a much larger scale. And the hope that I get from this is that once we complete that process that we did in 20 years, we probably will take 40 years, maybe 50 years. But once we've completed that journey, that you completed in 20 years, India could truly be a magnified version of what Singapore is. If we could think of the vast stretches of India being able to get to the same level of economic consolidation, of economic opportunity, of efficiency, of professionalism and performance, we could do this 100 times over, 1,000 times over. And when that happens, be it in our lifetimes or beyond our lifetimes, I think if there is one country that we will have to necessarily acknowledge and applaud with tremendous sense of gratitude, it will be Singapore, because you opened the doors for us to ASEAN. And I think that is an acknowledgement that will be writ large in the history of our relations with Southeast Asia. That you opened the doors. But not only did you open the door and say we're coming and be with friends in Southeast Asia, but what you did was to show us how to conduct ourselves in presence of these friends. And many of the Singapore, the visions about Singapore and perceptions of Singapore, translated themselves into popular legend in our country. I don't know how many of you would know that folk singers in the eastern part of my state, UP, and in Bihar, I've attended some events, folk singers singing about how they wanted to make Azamgarh into Singapore and how they wanted to convert Banaras and Guru into Singapore. Now, Singapore for them is an idea of pinnacle of success of human beings working together in a multi-plural society, converting their diversity into an enormous strength and richness, making it into a heritage of productivity. And that's being translated into a simple folk song in our country. And I think that's why it is important for an audience in Southeast Asia to know where has India reached. There are parts of India, islands perhaps, there are parts of India that look like Singapore and Hong Kong. But I will admit that they do not have the same level of efficiency that something that looks like Singapore and Hong Kong inevitably must have. There are parts of Bangalore, for instance, you can walk into the campus of Infosys, or you can walk into the campus of Wipro, you can walk into their training centers and the universities that they've set up, and you would think that you are in Hong Kong or Singapore. You can go into Gurgaon, parts of Gurgaon, and you will think that you are here again. If you go to parts of Hyderabad, parts of Bangalore, and you will think that you are in this part of the world. And I think there are some areas in which we could match the efficiency that you have become accustomed to as a matter of everyday life. Efficiency still is an achievement in India. It is both a necessity and an achievement. But efficiency here is a way of life. But the challenge that we have is a challenge that you had when you set off on this journey. When you set off on this journey, there were people who believed that this was not the path to take. There were people who believed that social justice required not to take the path of growth that you took. And there was political resistance, and that political resistance had to be overcome. There is political resistance in India as well, and we are in the process of overcoming that political resistance, but you could see in pure numbers and size and volumes and the spread, we would have, in proportionate terms, much greater resistance to handle. And that's the reason is that if you have to get transformation to take place without a revolution, it is tough in one way. A revolution is tough in another way, but a transformation is tough in one way. And a transformation, therefore, by its very nature, in an evolutionary process, takes that much longer. A revolution can happen much faster, but then controlling revolution itself is a very, very tricky matter. And I think you've seen, and perhaps you're seeing today, anything that looks more like a revolution than evolution is difficult to handle, because people say a revolution often eats up its own children. And you see what's happening in Egypt. Every time someone has said to us, "You're taking too long," our answer has always been, it's better to take long, but to do transformation and change that is sustainable, and to move fast, quickly, and then slip and fall. Because if you slip and fall, will there be capacity, leadership, opportunity, and determination to be able to overcome the setback is an imponderable that nobody has a clear answer to. What we have done in India is we've allowed for market reform to take place. Fortunately for us, we were never a completely closed market. We were an intermediate market, if I may describe it in that way. We were controlled in certain areas, but we were open in certain areas. And quite often, when people talk of privatization in our country, we say to them that here are examples of human enterprise in India where government has never been in control. There are huge parallel movements in various human sectors, human endeavor sectors, where government and the private sector has worked hand in hand, but the government has often been at a disadvantage. Private sector has often been much faster and has been much more attractive. And if I was to take school education as an example, private sector has been 10 times more attractive in school education than the state sector has been. But the state sector has been a very important ballast to ensure that people who would not be able to get into private sector education because of the cost would nevertheless not be excluded from the educational system. And what we have done in our own unique way is that we have now brought the two together. There are two ways in which we've brought the two together. In some places we've said to the private sector, why don't you take up the state schools and run them? So you get the infrastructure free, you get the wherewithals available from government. The government will continue to support some students. You can get other students from the private, from the open market, and you run this institution, give better quality education than we've been able to give. That's one way that we've brought congruence. The other way in which we've brought congruence is by saying to private sector schools, under new legislation that is the right to education, that every private sector school will have to concede 25% of its seats for people who are deserving but who do not have money to pay for their education, and the schools will be subsidized by the central government, partly by central government and partly by the state government, to an extent of say about 80% or whatever. So we will insist that the schools do some equivalent of CSR, but that much of that would be supported by the state and central government. So state and central government no longer setting up schools in which people will not get satisfactory results, but actually support what would be done in private schools. Similarly, in skills development and skills training, we are doing the same thing. We're still now, after 5 years of experimentation, we're trying to tweak it a little bit. What we've done is that having tried to run skills development programs, not with the kind of success that we were looking for, we said to the private sector, why don't you do the skills development? You don't have to have the institution in one place. You can follow the supply-demand principle and go where your recruitment base is available. Train in such subjects, in such areas where you can recruit people. Give them training. If you want to bring them into your factories, train them there. If you want to go to their habitations, train them there. Then at least 70% of the people that you train, you must bring into employment. And if you do that, the government will pay the cost of training. So we brought the public and private sector together in a unique way in which it's never been done in the past. So what we've done, even as we've opened up the marketplace, licensing has been reduced considerably. We do have issues equivalent to past licensing of capacity and price controls. We do have a parallel licensing system today, but that's because of environmental controls and environmental protection. But otherwise, we've opened up the marketplace. But what we have done is that while we open up the marketplace, We do away with price controls and controls of raw material, price control of raw materials. We are bolstering up the purchasing power amongst lower middle class people and people who are at the very low end of the social ladder by giving them free education and good quality education, as I mentioned to you, and then ensuring that they have good nourishment. The food security bill will be passed now very shortly. We give them a swipe card, 30,000 rupees worth of health insurance if they happen to be below the poverty line, and then of course we give them housing in the next 5 years, hoping to complete housing for all below poverty line citizens of our country. So we give them strength to protect them against gaps for them in the marketplace, as indeed for any onerous development that happens if there is high inflation, for instance, because of one reason or another. At least their food, their education, and their housing and health, 4 areas in which they will remain protected. And those are the areas where inflation hurts the most. So this is how we today present ourselves as a country that on the cutting edges is willing and moving forward to engage with the world. And here the focus, of course, being on ASEAN, is to see how we can develop what we at the commemorative celebrations saw as the ASEAN-India Partnership for Peace and Shared Prosperity. And that's that's really the purpose for which I was in Brunei, in our participation in both the ARF on security issues and our participation in the East Asia Summit and the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting to take forward our commitment to the integration of South Asia. And I say South Asia because we are the leader of the pack in South Asia, purely in terms of our economy and size of our population. But get South Asia connected with East Asia, with ASEAN, and then look beyond ASEAN into APEC. And this is, for us, the connectivity between Indian Ocean and the Pacific. So the Indo-Pacific Ocean connectivity is essentially replicated on the ground connectivity that we have started from India into Myanmar, and from Myanmar into Thailand, what we call the trilateral highway. And once we get to Thailand, beyond Thailand, the alignment to Cambodia, Laos and Vietnam will complete the dream of this fantastic concept, the idea of the Great Asian Highway. And once we have this Great Asian Highway, and we have the conceptual connectivity that we get on the Indo-Pacific ocean concept, then I think we can truly become contributors to the community of ASEAN, for which your target is 2015. We will be willing and ready at that moment to participate with you. What we are now doing with the European Union, still negotiating a broad-based agreement on trade and investment with the European Union, we've already completed with ASEAN. So we are really, in many ways, steps ahead of our collaboration with other major economic organizations. We are way ahead in terms of our cultural links. We are way ahead in terms of our emotional commitment, and I think we are way ahead in terms of our presence in the community of Southeast Asia. And I hope that the warmth and the indulgence that we get at each gathering and in each meeting, and I've just come from 3 very important meetings here in this short time that I've been today here in Singapore, and I must say that every meeting tells us the same tale again and again, that we are truly partners, or shall we say, we are truly brothers and sisters of one large family. Some of the connectivity issues are really our responsibility. We have, as I said, we must provide the same levels of efficiency response that is now become, that ASEAN has become accustomed to. But at the same time, we hope that the willingness, emotional willingness, and the intellectual willingness to give India a greater opportunity to engage here would be something that will constantly be translated into reality. I needn't tell you that the bilateral trade between India and ASEAN region for 2012, the target was $70 billion US. We surpassed that target despite the fact that the world is in difficult times. In the last few years, our trade has been growing with ASEAN at 22%. In the last few years, it grew as much as 32% in 2012. And I believe by the time that the ASEAN community is created in 2015, we would have crossed $100 billion. Now that's not anything to scoff at or anything to put away as being unimportant. What we do need, of course, is in our country a greater attitudinal expansion that must take place. We have, in the past few years, been somewhat inward-looking. And I must say that today, in our conversation that I had with your leadership here, it was significantly flagged that ASEAN cannot afford to be inward-looking because ASEAN is too small in terms of the number of consumers. ASEAN needs markets, and therefore a lot of the ASEAN economies are export-driven. India has not been an export-driven economy because India has a huge domestic consumption base. But we need exports. We need exports both to give impetus to growth, but also because we need to earn dollars in order to import the huge amount of fuel that we import. 80% of our fuel is imported. Therefore, we need hard currency to import. There was a time when we did trade in rupees to import oil from Russia, from the Soviet Union, but that's not available to us today. So even though we were not really an export-driven economy in the moments of our growth, and we still remain today a very significant domestic consumption economy, it's important for us to engage with the world because we need hard currency in order to be able to import enough fuel to keep ourselves going. One important one important fact that I want to share with you is the strength of the Indian economy is when our inflation rates were very high, 22% 2 years ago, because of the special packages that we gave to bolster the economy, and the world economy was slowing down, in fact diving, and because of the money supply being liberalized, inflation rates were going up. And when we tried to contain the inflation rates, our manufacturing base began to be affected, and we had a very difficult balancing act to do in the last 3 years. Our economy was growing at 8%. We were actually beginning to think of 9, 10, and today we're down to 5%. And this has all happened within a year and a half. But at 5%, it is important to know that when we thought India's economy was slowing down, the two-wheeler sales in our rural areas were skyrocketing. And that's where the internal strength of the Indian economy comes. That our rural areas are now finally able to stand up in the marketplace, and their purchasing power continues to grow, their saving rates continue to remain stable, and with the enormous amount of expenditure now going into infrastructure development taking place, with huge fast roads that you take for granted, but for us is something new on the landscape. And those fast roads now cutting across rural areas, offering, as it were, a real new opportunity that people can tangibly feel India is stirring and India is beginning to change. But what we'll have to do is, as we look towards South Asia, we'll have to ensure that South Asia is stable. Southeast Asia is stable, Southeast Asia is without tension, and then Southeast Asia keeps those lanes clear and open, which have been the arteries of your growth, and those are the sea lanes. And therefore, when issues arise about possibility of disagreement in the ASEAN region and bilateral disagreements that could appear to seem very dangerous, we join in the advice that everyone gives to each other here, which is that it is very important through dialogue and peaceful means to ensure that these irritants are kept at bay. Southeast Asia must not become victim of disagreements on issues which are eminently solvable and eminently avoidable. We certainly are willing to help in any way possible. There are many dimensions and elements of our cooperation. I mentioned cooperation with ASEAN region. We have cooperation under BIMSTEC, which is the grouping of the Bay Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral, Technical and Economic Cooperation. We have our Mekong Ganga cooperation, which again is very, very significant, and that provides linkage between India, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar and Vietnam, adding one more dimension of strength to our relationship with this region. And so, as we look at the experience of our past and we look at the experience of your past, we believe that there is much for us to learn and much for us to share, much that we believe we have to offer, and much we believe that we have to take from you. I think it's important that we protect your region from tension. It's important that we protect your region from the shadow of terrorism that strikes in some parts of Southeast Asia from time to time. If I might say, we have some experience on handling terrorism, and we have some experience in being able to show patience with people who believe violence is the answer to our future, while we all are confident that the real future lies in working together, in collaborating, in treating each other as members of a family, where the prosperity of one will be a shared prosperity of the entire family. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.